Lifting will stun your growth. Deadlifts will herniate your discs. Failing squat or bench press will kill you. Alright, you crazies, those are worst case scenarios for lifting. What are some other worst case scenarios though? Getting into a car crash on your way to literally anywhere, a gamma ray vaporizing the earth in the next 5 seconds. People have to learn how to drive to minimize the chances of a car crash, but there's nothing stopping people from just turning the wheel into a tree. Similar to how you can adapt and learn how to lift to minimize chances of injury, even if nothing is stopping you from loading up an extra 100 pounds and getting crushed to death. There's a risk with everything. People even consider lifting as an unsustainable form of exercise, like pro sports, that can only be done in your young glory days because of how much it wears on your joints. I actually further recommend you lift the older you get. Lifting, if done safely, will improve bone density, prevent muscle atrophy, improve tendon strength, and much more. All of these things are massive problems for the older generation, but they can be stopped by just lifting. You have to lift right though, with the right protocols and techniques. Let's start with warm-ups. You don't need an insane 20-minute stretching routine for a warm-up. Warm-ups don't prevent injury. They minimize the chances of it. You'd be surprised that you could just do 3 warm-up sets of your first exercise and you'll be mostly fine. But that's the bare minimum I would recommend if you're short on time. If you have time, I'll give you a simple blueprint for both upper and lower days that should only take around 5 to 10 minutes. We're going to start with a dynamic stretching warm-up of around 2 to 3 exercises. For an upper body day, I recommend starting with 20 reps of arm circles, then going into 10 reps of external rotations with a pipe, and ending it off with 20 reps of shoulder dislocation. For a lower body day, I recommend starting with 20 reps of leg swings, then going into 10 reps of a weight shift for each side, and ending it off with 10 reps of cat camels. Make sure you don't hold a stretch for any longer than 20 seconds, since that would make them more of static stretches, which have been shown to decrease performance when lifting. Secondly, we're going to do 1 to 2 strengthening exercises. For an upper body day, I start with 20 reps of banded external rotations, and end it off with 20 reps of Y raises with 5 pounds. For a lower body day, I start with 20 reps on each side of banded clamshells, and end it off with 10 reps of banded squats with 20% of my max. Now finally, we're going to go into our 3 warm-up sets. Set 1 is 50% of your working weight for 5 reps, set 2 is 75% of your working weight for 3 reps, and set 3 is 100% of your working weight for 1 rep. After doing all that, you should be 100% ready for your working sets. You only really need to do warm-up sets for your first lift. However, you can always add 1 warm-up set before every exercise to ensure you're ready. You don't have to follow this exact protocol. You can always swap out stretches for the ones that help you better, and you can always get more specific with your strengthening exercises. For example, if you need to work on internal rotation strength, then add in banded internal rotations. That's about it for your warm-up. But there's more to preventing injury than just warming up well. Most people who are new to lifting and exercise in general are stiff as hell, especially in places like the lower back, the hips, the shoulders, etc. Most people can't squat to full depth without butt wing, or even get into a basic hip hinge without weight. You're gonna need to develop your mobility if you want to achieve conventional ranges of motion with exercises like the squat, deadlift, and overhead press, without heavily risking injury. Parallel or below is a conventional range of motion for the squat. Being able to grab the bar with a neutral torso is a conventional range of motion for the deadlift. And being able to bring the bar to your chin and lock out your arms to the top with a decently neutral torso is a conventional range of motion for the overhead press. Following some sort of mobility routine after lifting or on rest days can greatly help you improve your general mobility. To get more specific though, for squats, most people struggle with ankle and hip mobility. The ankle mobility that matters in this case is how far forward your knee can travel past your toes. And no, moving your knees past your toes isn't dangerous. All it does is shift more load onto the quads. Your knees can adapt to the new stress. The hip mobility that matters in this case is how far your leg can be tucked and externally rotated without your lower back rounding. For hip mobility, I recommend you do the weight shift and or frog pose. For ankle mobility, I recommend a banded ankle joint mobilization and or a box ankle stretch. For deadlifts, most people struggle with hip mobility and hamstring flexibility. For hamstring flexibility, a foot elevated hinge as well as the toe touches from earlier work. For overhead presses, most people struggle with thoracic mobility and lat flexibility. Thoracic mobility is the mid-back's ability to extend, or your upper arm's ability to elevate to where it's in line with the shoulder. For thoracic mobility, I recommend you do wall rotations and or the cat camel. For lat flexibility, I recommend you do an overhead lat stretch and or seated wall slides. For each exercise, I recommend 1 to 3 sets of 5 reps with a 20-second hold on the stretch position. You can progress to do more reps or get a deeper stretch. Mobility doesn't always have to do with flexibility flexibility. Stability and strength also matter, so strengthening the stabilizer muscles like the rotator cuff and hip flexors can help. For that, you can do 3 sets of banded external rotations and 3 sets of hanging leg raises. Having the ability to go deep isn't everything though. You also have to be strong in those ranges of motion, which can be practiced with the exercise you're already trying to do while using regular loads. Don't be afraid to have to go lighter though if you've already been lifting but improved your range of motion. Alright, we got warm-ups and mobility, but maybe you're still afraid of potentially hurting your back doing spine-loaded movements like squats and deadlifts. Injury on your spine during spine loading happens when your spine isn't stable. You see, if your back starts neutral and then rounds as you pick the weight up, that's where injury can occur. But if you start the lift rounded with good spine stability, you have much less risk for injury. Movement of the spine under load is what's bad. Try not to purposely round the spine, however. It usually makes it harder to keep a stable spine that can support the load. For some others, it's fine and gives them better leverage, but as a beginner, assume you're not one of those people. I was pretty much fine doing squats and deadlifts for a bit. I kept my back neutral and core tight. Eventually though, my legs started putting out much more power than my spine could hold, and that imbalance led to minor injury. This was easily preventable, however. All I needed to learn was how to properly brace and how to progress my bracing ability. Bracing is essentially the ability to create pressure around your spine by taking a breath and contracting the muscles around it, mainly the abdominals. This pressure creates equal and opposite tension around the spine to hold it stable like guy wires on a radio tower. Here are a few simple steps to get a solid brace. Contract your abs to tuck your ribs down. Take a deep breath while keeping that contraction and feel your core expand all around. Then contract your abs as hard as possible. When you need to exhale, forcefully let all the air out while keeping your abs contracted, and then repeat from steps 2 and up. You'll notice doing this that it gets harder and harder to breathe and maintain the contraction as you take more breaths. How do we progress our bracing ability? Start with the 90-90 bracing drill I will link down below. Once you can do 20 breaths without losing the contraction, move on to planks and side planks for as many breaths as you can. Once you can do 20 breaths of those, then move on to more advanced bracing exercises like stir the pots, bird dogs, and or ab rollout. Eventually, you can start adding weight, but be very careful to never let yourself lose your brace or your neutral spine during the exercises. You don't want to teach yourself bad habits. If your back is out of position, the set is over. Alright, we know how to be safe while the weight is being lifted, but to gain muscle, we need to train hard. What if we get to the point where we just can't lift the weight and get it back onto the racks? This is the easiest method of safely failing a lift. Whenever you're in a gym and you're gonna do squats or bench presses, look for a rack that has safety arms and set them to the appropriate height. For the squat, this should be 1 to 3 notches below where the bar is at the bottom of your lift, which you can find with the empty bar. For the bench press, it's a bit tricky to explain. Lay completely flat on the bench, and wherever the bar ends up on your chest, set the safety arms at that height. Now for your actual bench, you're gonna have a slight arch in your back so the bar doesn't hit the safety arms every rep. And when you need the safety arms to catch the bar, you can just flatten your arch and let the bar come down. If you don't have safety arms though, there are other options. You can always have a spotter, of course, but I honestly don't like relying on them. For the bench press, you have the roll of shame, which can be practiced with lighter loads. The main point is that you use every other muscle of your body to get the weight as far from your head as possible after failing. Don't panic, and push it towards your hip crease and try to sit up. Once you do that, you can take the weight off your legs and controllably put it back down. Some bruises on your thighs are far better than guillotining yourself. For the squat, you have the bail, which can also be practiced with lighter loads. Don't worry about floor damage. Your life is way more important. Essentially, when you feel the weight coming back down, you pause, get your arms off the bar, and jump forward, letting the bar fall. This ensures nobody is crushed to death. Besides all that, you can also just avoid going to failure on these exercises. This is tricky for beginners as they want to be close to failure, but don't exactly know what that looks like or feels like. That's why I recommend taking at least 1 set of each exercise to failure with the safety protocols, and then using that as a reference to how many reps to do for future sets. Keep in mind, as you gain strength, you'll be able to do more reps or more weight before failure. For very heavy lifts like the squat and deadlift, I don't recommend going to balls out failure. Once you notice you lose your brace, your back starts rounding, or your technique starts getting worse, then the set is over. Stopping when your form starts deteriorating is also known as technical failure and is good for these exercises. If you're familiar with RPE and RIR, technical failure would occur around 8 to 9 RPE or 1 to 2 RIR. RIR is how many reps you have left before truly failing, and RPE is the rate of perceived exertion for 1 to 10. Alright, so now we know how to be safe while lifting, but no matter what we do, our joints and muscles are slowly going to accumulate fatigue, which needs to be addressed. For the average beginner, you don't actually accumulate that much fatigue on your joints since the loads you can lift are not much. However, once you get to around the intermediate phase, which is a 225 bench, 315 squat, and 405 deadlift or more, you'll definitely notice yourself getting things like localized joint pain or inflammation. When that occurs, it's important to look up why that could be happening. Maybe your form is off or something, or you're too fatigued from repetitive stress. You should also swap out the exercise for a similar variation. So for example, if the barbell bench press gave me shoulder pain, I could swap it out for the dumbbell neutral grip bench press and see if it doesn't give me any pain, while I research or just simply let my shoulder recover. The last resort would be to take a deload from the exercise or your entire training routine to let everything recover. I'll have a more extensive video on that soon, just not right after this video is uploaded. Just make sure you don't psych yourself out and deload too often. I would say in the intermediate stage or above, you can take deloads every 6 to 10 weeks. And that's about all I had to share with you in this video today, brother. These are a lot of tips, so incorporate them one at a time. There will also be a link to the Discord server, which you can join if you want to interact with me and other random fitness enjoyers. Injury prevention essentially boils down to warming up properly, making sure you have good mobility for your lifts, being able to brace your core properly, knowing how to properly fail lifts, and being on top of recovery. Once you get those things down, I guarantee you will not ever have to worry about an injury. Being on top of recovery also has more components than just regulating joint and muscle fatigue though. You should also be on top of your sleep to make sure your body is getting adequate rest and you're not trying to max out on squats when you're tired as fuck. If you want to be on top of your sleep game, I have just a video for you right here. Anyways, what are you waiting for, man? Go start working and take action, and I hope you have a great day.